Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Wesselman, a product lead at Shopify on the app platform. And today we're going to be talking about the re engineered Shopify app dev and declarative custom data definitions, two features that were released as part of the latest Shopify editions. So, with the re engineered Shopify app dev, you're now able to test your entire app, both extensions and configuration, isolated to a given development store. I think the best showcase of this is the new declarative custom data definitions, which allow you to offload the management of your meta field and meta object definitions to Shopify through a TOML defined schema. So we're going to talk about both of these today, and hopefully then you'll take the opportunity to go through them yourself in our workshop. So let's start by talking about the re-engineered Shopify app dev. And when I say re-engineered, I really do mean re-engineered. We built this from the ground up to improve the experience and give you that isolation and complete testing capability for your app. So I assume this looks familiar to many of you watching, where each developer on your team needs to maintain a separate copy of the app, as well as the app configuration in a TOML file. This is inefficient. This adds to the startup cost for each new developer on the team, and leads to issues where you're not sure which copy of the app you're working with in some cases. So with the new Shopify app dev, we fixed that. And now any changes you make to your app, whether extensions or configuration, are isolated to your chosen development store. So each person on your team can have their own development store, but share a single app. This process probably looks familiar to many of you as well, where if you wanted to make changes to app configuration, you had to quit dev, open a new terminal window, and deploy. This is true for access scopes, declarative webhooks, or really anything in the app TOML. However, with the new app dev, these configuration changes are now picked up automatically and pushed to your development store and only your development store. So you can do things like change access scopes, add declarative webhooks, and so on, and they're made available to your dev store automatically. But there's more. We made some other great changes to app dev along the way. First off, the app is going to be installed automatically for you. There's no need to go into your dev shop after running app dev to install the app. And similarly, if you make any changes to access scopes, we're going to auto accept those as well. So you can make the change to your access scope and just continue working. Additionally, our file watcher is now going to pick up new and removed extensions. You can see in the little animation here, we're creating a function on a loop, and each new function created is just being pushed to your dev store automatically without needing to stop and restart the dev command. We're also going to keep your app URL up to date automatically on your dev shop. So if you're using the default Cloudflare tunnels, you know that that app URL is dynamic every time you run it, and it's going to be different for every developer on the team. So we're going to update that app URL for you, but again, only on your dev shop. So there's no longer any risk of accidentally updating the app URL on your production app because that change is isolated to your development store. We're also going to keep that app preview around after the dev command ends. This gives you control over any side effects of the app preview ending, such as deletion of any function instances or placements of checkout UI extensions. But it also, for extension-only apps, gives you the ability to share that preview with others, even if your dev command has ended. And to go with that, we're going to make it much clearer when an app preview is running on a store. So you know why your app is behaving a particular way because it's using development code. And you'll see that in the dev console in the Shopify admin. So not to get too into the weeds, but to compare the old app dev versus the new app dev and how it works. First, looking at the old app dev, we had this concept of extension drafts that all your dev stores would read from, so they'd all see the same draft copy of your app thus the need for separate copies of your app. But it would only be used if this development store preview feature was on, which the CLI would try to turn on for you, but could also be turned on from partners. And of course, in the for app configuration, you still had to deploy it. So lots of convoluted processes that weren't always clear to you as far as why the dev version of your app was behaving as it was. So with the new app dev, we've made this much more straightforward and aligned it with the behavior of Shopify app deploy. With app deploy, the released extensions and app config are distributed to all the shops which the app is installed on. With app dev, we're going to follow a similar model now, except we're just going to distribute that version of the app to your development shop. And every developer running dev is going to have the same behavior where their version of the extensions and config are going to be released to their isolated development shop. So again, following the same model that we do for app deploy now, but with that shop isolation. Before we move on to declarative custom data, I wanted to call out one more new feature we added to the Shopify app dev command with Editions, and that is localhost-based development. So now for embedded apps and most extensions, you're able to bypass the use of tunnels through HTTPS certificates that Shopify CLI generates for you. This gives you much faster startup and hot reloading and allows for longer running dev sessions since you no longer have a tunnel that can expire. And like I said, this will work for embedded apps and most extensions, but be careful with features such as webhooks or app proxies that require a direct connection from Shopify to your app, because now there is no longer a tunnel. All right. Like I said, one of the best showcases of the new Shopify app dev command is declarative custom data definitions. So let's dive into those a bit. To understand why we created declarative custom data definitions, let's go back to the winter edition of 2023 when we launched Meta Objects. Meta Objects allow you to define complex data structures with built-in type safety and access controls. By using Meta Objects as a data store, you get to take advantage of Shopify's performance and scale and dedicate more time to your business logic instead of to how you're storing your data. However, while we've seen developers increasingly using Meta Objects and Meta Fields to store their app data, the current developer experience does leave some things to be desired, and really is a significant departure from how you might be storing your data in other relational or traditional databases. First off, let's talk about how these definitions are managed. In a traditional database, you configure your schema statically outside of your business logic. In contrast, meta object definitions have to be created by an API, usually in some sort of install hook. This process can really be inefficient because now you not only do you have to create this code and do it on startup, but before any of your other logic can happen, before the user can use your app, you need to make sure that these operations have been completed. Secondly, any data migrations can be really painful. Let's take checkout blocks as a use case, a pretty popular app that we have here at Shopify. They need to retrieve the list of shops and access tokens from their database when they want to do a data migration and actually iterate through each of them so that they can update each shop individually with the new schema, as well as any data manipulation that comes with that schema change. If any issues arise during this process, then the shops that checkout blocks is installed on can be in an inconsistent state, and there's no real easy way to roll back or make them all consistent. Lastly, meta object and meta field definitions are shop scoped. And what this means is that if your public app installed on a shop that's already reached its limit, you're out of luck. You can't use those definitions because you can't create them. This means you can't rely on meta field or meta objects for critical use cases without having some sort of fallback solution. Again, because if you can't create those definitions, you have no way of using them. So our answer to all these challenges is declarative custom data, a way for you to offload the management of these definitions to Shopify. With declarative custom data, you can now manage these definitions statically as part of your app TOML. Similar to webhooks and access scopes and other app configuration, you can now define your data structure in TOML outside of the runtime of your application. And with that, it's going to work seamlessly with the new app dev. As you make changes to your configuration, as you modify the definitions, app dev is going to give you real-time feedback on any errors and then automatically push those updates to your development store. And once again, I'll emphasize just to your development store, so you can work in isolation as you make changes to your schema. And with declarative custom data, your schema migrations are also atomic. When you deploy your app, our app platform is going to distribute those definitions across all the shops that the app is installed on and do it in parallel. So that's going to significantly speed up any migrations. And then if you run into any issues, you can simply go to the new developer dashboard and roll back to a previous version of your app, which will ensure that all shops are on a consistent version of your schema. And finally, when you use declarative custom data definitions, you get your own bucket of app scope limits. So this means you no longer have to compete for resources with other applications, and you can reliably create and utilize definitions that are specific for your app. But I'd say to fully appreciate the power of declarative custom data definitions and the new re-engineered app dev, you should use them yourself. So I'd really encourage you to try out this workshop, and please provide us any feedback along the way on the Shopify developer community. So thanks for listening, y'all. Just to recap, we talked about the re-engineered Shopify app dev that allows you to test your entire app in isolation, including all extensions and configuration, and declarative custom data definitions, which allow you to offload the management of meta field and meta object definitions to Shopify and give you a great way of managing data for your app. Thanks for listening.